Call is being recorded. I'll now turn the call over to your host, Senator Portman.
Thanks, and thanks all for being on, and welcome back to Senate session. This is the 197th press conference we've had with Ohio reporters in D.C. since taking office, so we're getting close to that magic 200, or if there's something special, stay tuned. It's going to be a busy month in September. Got a lot on our plate. Obviously, the consideration of the federal debt limit is part of that. We're now hearing that that debt limit is close to being reached. But also, of course, we're dealing with the emergency aid for Hurricane Harvey victims, watching, of course, what's happening with Irma very carefully. The second hurricane is working its way up from the island up to Florida. The annual defense authorization bill is going to be on the floor. I've got some important Ohio provisions in there. We're looking at comprehensive tax reform still this month and next month, trying to get something done before year end. I'm very involved in that. And looking continually at these healthcare issues, particularly the cost of insurance. We just heard today from Ohio that the rates next year are going to go up double digits again, as unfortunately we all predicted. In fact, the rate increase without the DSRs being extended is 34%, we're told, and 23% if the CSRs are extended. So we can't give up on dealing with this healthcare issue because these cost increases are just unaffordable for people. 119% increase in premiums alone since 2013 now, and that doesn't include higher copays, higher deductibles. So this is something that for middle-class families in Ohio, particularly those in the individual market, we continue to have to focus on. Was home over the August time period, had a lot of trips around the state, and really enjoyed being home. Last week I was on a defense tour, went 100 miles around the state in 5 or 6 days. Went to 13 different counties, saw some of the best military bases in the country, and they're all right in our home state of Ohio. And it's incredibly important to our state. We're one of the top defense spending states in the country. We have now 66,000 jobs that are supported through defense spending in Ohio. That's more than $4 billion in salaries, actually a $14 billion economic impact on our state. We have the largest single-site employer in the state, which is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as a military installation. And assisting these programs and ensuring that the men and women in uniform that I saw last week have proper funding and support from us is one of my top priorities, has been in the Senate. And it's great to be at the bases and to see firsthand the funding needs, the modernization needs, invaluable when I come back here to Washington to fight for funding, as I will be doing in the defense authorization bill. It was also a chance just to thank those men and women in uniform for what they do for all of us every day, and that was really inspiring, as it always is, to talk to them and get to know some of the guardsmen and active duty and reservists who are stepping up and helping to protect our country and all of us. I also spent a lot of time the last few weeks back in Ohio learning more about how the human trafficking and sex trafficking legislation that we've introduced would help. I held roundtables with anti-trafficking groups in Cleveland and in Youngstown, and also met with trafficking victims at the Oasis House in Dayton. In Columbus, I held a screening of the film I Am Jane Doe. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. It documents a few different young women, child sex trafficking victims as they try to get judicial help, try to seek justice against Backpage.com. This is the website that facilitated their trafficking and that is by far the biggest trafficker online. And as you know, these 3 sex trafficking victims and others have not been able to break through the legal immunity that's in federal law, and that's one reason it's so important we pass our bipartisan legislation. We have heard from victims, survivors all over Ohio that this has moved from the street corner to the smartphone. Online is where it's now happening increasingly, and that's why, based on all the data that I've seen, there's a big increase in sex trafficking is because of this online presence. That's why we have to figure out a way to get at this problem. And the Communications Decency Act, which is where the courts have seen there is an immunity. Our legislation, which is called the Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act, or SESTA, it changes the law in a significant way to hold these websites accountable if they facilitate sex trafficking, like Backpage. And I've now got 27 bipartisan Senate colleagues who have co-sponsored the bill, and dozens of anti-trafficking groups and law enforcement groups around the country who strongly support our efforts. We expect to get more co-sponsors this week, and we're going to continue to push it hard. By the way, just since we were last here in session, another judge, this one in Sacramento, threw out charges against Backpage because of the immunity granted by the Communications Decency Act. And that judge, as others have, essentially called on Congress to say, you know, this is a legislative matter. Congress has to fix this thing. It's not a matter of litigation. It's a matter of legislation, as the First Circuit had said a few months ago. I think victims should be able to get the justice they deserve, and I think people should be able to prosecute these websites that facilitate sex trafficking. So anyway, we'll continue to push it. The tech community, as you know, has expressed concerns about doing anything to change this law, the Communications Decency Act. I've had lots of conversations, including over the break, with the tech community. I think they're wrong. I was pleased to see today that a tech giant, Oracle, announced it would support our bill because they read the bill and they've talked to us and they understand what we're doing, which is a very narrow change in this law to be able to focus on those bad actors, and the good actors who are online, I have nothing to worry about. Anyway, also in the last month, 50 attorneys general, 48 state AGs, and AGs in D.C. wrote a letter to me and to our leadership saying, fix this law. So you got virtually the entire group of attorneys general around the country saying the same thing. I'm hoping the Senate's going to act quickly to consider this and to help these victims get justice and help ensure that we can prosecute these crimes successfully. I mentioned tax reform. I did meet with business leaders and workers and constituents of all stripes, all across Ohio on this. People who are self-employed, people who work for small businesses, people who are large companies, and talked about the need for tax reform, how it can help everybody. We had a tax reform roundtable at the Dayton Area Chamber. We also had this come up in all of my sessions I had with manufacturers, for instance, in Cleveland, at a roundtable there. We had employee town halls at General Tool Company in Cincinnati, and also at the Joint Systems Manufacturing Center in Lima, Ohio. And at those town halls and at my teletown hall last night, this issue came up. People want to know, can we get tax reform done that will actually simplify the job of going through the painful process of paying your taxes, and can we get some relief? And I think we can do that with tax reform. I think it's going to help middle-class Ohioans. I think it's going to help grow jobs, and most importantly to me, help grow wages. If it's done right, tax reform is going to result in better wages and better jobs. And it's going to help middle-class families who are struggling right now with the cost of living, and the middle-class squeeze where you got higher costs like health care and yet flat wages. So I think this is really critical to get it done. I commend President Trump for taking the issue on the road. Today he's in North Dakota talking about tax reform as an example, because we got to get the message out there as to why this is so important. So I'm going to continue to focus on that with all the other work we have to do in the next couple of months. There will be plenty of distractions, but we just got to keep our head down and continue to work on this issue and work with the House, work with the White House and others on a bipartisan basis to try to get tax reform done. On FEMA and the hurricane relief, we just had a briefing by the OB director, who said that FEMA is going to run out of money probably by this weekend, and so we've got to vote. The Senate has to vote on providing these additional resources, and I support that. We've all seen the footage of the tragedy down in Texas, and of course we're praying for those folks in Florida and surrounding islands who are now in the path of even a bigger hurricane, at least more powerful, in Hurricane Irma. So I want to go out of my way today to commend the first responders for their amazing efforts over the past couple weeks. Specifically, take a moment to praise some of the Ohioans who are down there. I was at these dozen military bases last week, and at 3 of the bases they had groups that were either already down there or going down there, including a healthcare unit out of the Rickenbacker base in Columbus. The Wright-Patterson group is already down there. And our Ohio Task Force 1 is down there. This is the urban search and rescue team that's based in Dayton. It has team members from all over southwest Ohio, and they've been down in Texas helping to rescue and recover people. They went down, as you may recall, to Katrina. They were also, of course, at 9/11, and now they're down in Texas, and they're probably going to be headed to Florida as well. They are a really important part of our disaster response efforts, and I'm very proud of them for the work that they do and the risk that they take for all of us. Tomorrow, I'm going to testify on behalf of Whirlpool Corporation and their workers, and specifically the plant that's in Ohio. They've got big facilities in Ohio. Most of their production's in Ohio. Clyde, Ohio is where they do a lot of their washing machines. The testimonies before the International Trade Commission. This will be my third time testifying on behalf of the Ohio workers to challenge an unfair trade practice by some overseas manufacturers. And in this case, you've got foreign companies that are skirting trade laws and dumping washers, meaning selling them below their cost in the United States. This is hurting Ohio businesses and workers. It's unfair. Whirlpool, by the way, in that one facility in Clyde has 3,000 Ohioans, and their jobs are affected by this directly. So we're going to talk about specifically the Whirlpool case, and more generally the way in which our legislation called Level the Playing Field Act, which got passed about a year and a half ago, how that can actually help to win this case. This has been what we did with regard to the steel cases. We won those, won 3 of those cases last summer, and now we believe we can win this case as well, in part thanks to the new legislation we got passed recently called the Level the Playing Field Act. We also have a hearing tomorrow that I'm chairing in the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. It's about the federal permitting reform process. As you recall, in 2013, along with Senator Claire McCaskill, I authored legislation to streamline the federal permitting process, and it creates a new federal permitting improvement steering council. After a few years of trying to get that bill passed, we finally got it done as part of the highway bill, the FAST Act, in 2015. And this hearing is going to be an oversight hearing examining how that's being implemented. We call it FAST 41 because the provision is Section 41 of the FAST Act. And I have met with the council. This is an interagency council. I have talked to them about our legislative intent and encouraged them to be much more aggressive in going after these issues where you have bureaucracy and red tape standing in the way of building something. Our goal here is to help rebuild our aging infrastructure, but to do it more efficiently and effectively, and this is a great way to do it. So we're going to have, again, an oversight hearing on that tomorrow. There'll be some interesting information that will come out of that as to how our crumbling infrastructure and our economic growth can be improved by aggressive implementation of the permitting reform legislation. So lots else going on, too. But with that, I'll stop and take your questions.
Jack Torrey over at the Dispatch.
Jack?
Today, Senator Brown on a conference call said if McConnell tries to do tax reform on a partisan basis, reconciliation, he says, I can't imagine they will get any kind of comprehensive pro-growth tax reform. They might get a tax cut for the rich, but that would be about it. Do you think you can come up with a way to just get tax reform a little what you have talked about on a partisan basis, or do you need it to be a bipartisan bill?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think it should be bipartisan, and we're holding hearings in the Finance Committee, and the Ways and Means Committee has held hearings as well. So, I think there's an opportunity for us to get something done on a bipartisan basis, because the current code is just broken. I mean, it is just broken. But having said that, if we can't get it on a bipartisan basis, I think we have to push forward and try to get something done. We welcome ideas from Democrats, and I don't believe in the premise that we, can't do it under reconciliation, because that vehicle is available to us. But I hope we do it on a bipartisan basis. And by the way, there are lots of Democrats on the Finance Committee who believe that the tax code is broken and would like to see it fixed. We may not agree on everything, but if we can find common ground on the middle-class tax cut, for instance, or dealing with some of this overseas stuff, as I remember Senator Schumer and I agreed on the international side about 2 years ago now, and issued a report on it. We were put in charge of the working group on international. and that was about repatriation. So there are areas where I do see common ground.
Thank you.
Hi, Senator. This is Adora Namigadde from WOSU News. And I'm wondering, can Congress find a solution to DACA? And if so, how do you think that will happen?
Yeah, I certainly hope so, and I think so. And I say that because I think there's consensus around this one. Maybe not everybody agrees with what ought to be included with a DACA reform, because I've heard a lot of different ideas on that. But I think with regard to DACA, there's a general agreement that Congress ought to roll up their sleeves and legislate on this. I think, just about every Republican, maybe every Republican, believed that what President Obama did was not constitutional. In other words, it wasn't constitutional because it was a legislative action, not an administrative action. And as you know, the courts have generally agreed with that with regard to his immigration actions that were done administratively. And I think there are something like 14 attorneys general who said they're going to sue, if President Trump does not put this back in the hands of Congress. So this will continue to be a legal issue that will add a lot of uncertainty until we do legislate on it. So I think we should legislate. I personally believe it would be good to do something broader, because the immigration system has so many issues and problems that could be addressed. But no matter what, I would like to get the DACA issue resolved and make that part of permanent law and do it the right way. So I think that President Trump has given us an opportunity here for Congress to act. And I agree when people would be deported for certain kinds of felonies. But in general, I think there is a consensus around the fact that we should fix DACA on a permanent basis. In other words, let these young people who came here with their families through no fault of their own, let them have the certainty to know that there is a permanent fix. And I mentioned earlier that there is interest in combining it with other things. I personally would like to see us have a stronger workplace in enforcement, entry and exit, where we don't know who's in this country because we don't have the right technology to be able to know who has overstayed a visa. And so I think there are other things that we can do as well. But I do hope that we don't miss this opportunity. And it shouldn't take 6 months, by the way. We should be able to do it in less time, because we've had the debates. We know what's possible in terms of DACA, and let's pass something legislatively to give predictability and certainty.
Senator, this is Steve Bannon, Fox 19 in Cincinnati. Just to follow up on that, is now the time to start reworking DACA? It just kind of sounds like Capitol Hill has their hands full. Was there any coordination with the White House and Republican leadership, and is now the time to start working on that?
Yeah, I think we can do it, as well as the other issues I talked about. Yeah, we'll be busy, but that's what we get paid to do, is to get stuff done. And I think it's different committees. The Judiciary Committee is likely to take this up, as opposed to the Finance Committee taking up the tax reform, as opposed to the Health Committee taking up these healthcare market reforms we talked about, as opposed to the Budget Committee dealing with how do you get the spending bill done by September 30th. So I think there's an opportunity to get DACA done, even in the context of a lot of other things coming down the pike.
Was it a surprise when the President put this on the agenda right now, or was there any coordination with the party?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think it was a surprise because they had talked about it, but I don't know in terms of exact timing on coordination. I think the thought was when we got back into session there would be a decision made one way or the other. And I think, as I understand it, it could have gone any of three ways, and the administration chose kind of the middle ground rather than saying it's ended. They said 6 months, and Congress should legislate on this in the meantime. Instead of keeping the executive action in place, again, which would have been subject to additional lawsuits, and I'm not sure how that would have come out. That would have created additional uncertainty as well. So I think it's an opportunity, again, that Congress now has to do something that helps to fix at least part of a broken immigration.
With regards to the church in Columbus providing a sanctuary for an undocumented mother, what are your thoughts on that situation now and then even moving forward?
Yeah, are you talking about Edith Espinel?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know the details of it. I know that my office has been contacted. And just as we do with all these cases, we're obviously going to be interested in seeing if we can be helpful. Federal agencies like ICE cannot relay stuff to our office, information to happen in the next year or so, but beyond that, you just don't know. I mean, BRAC is the opportunity to have a broader commission that looks at all the bases around the country, and then they, come up with recommendations that Congress votes on with an up or down vote. But it doesn't mean that you don't have decisions being made every day administratively by the services. In our case, for instance, the Air Force has made decisions, as you know, in the past to shut down bases. We fought against that, for instance, in Mansfield, and were able to be successful. We lost our mission there of what were called J-27s, which is a smaller air cargo plane. We got C-130s instead, and that's worked out well. We need to upgrade those planes now, by the way. But that wasn't a BRAC, it was just an administrative decision. So when I go around to these bases, I say, yeah, we're concerned about BRAC, and please continue to do what you're doing to work with the community and to have a plan in place and to make sure all these bases are invaluable to the military as assets. And I believe they all are. Like, we can talk about that base by base if you'd like. But it's also important just to stay in very close touch with the services. And we have a lot of, as I mentioned, Air National Guard units in Ohio, especially. So the Air Force in particular, we're very close to them. Stay very close to them. I always meet with their leadership. I was very involved in the nomination process, and will continue to be with regard to the top people, including the Secretary of the Air Force, who's now in place. So this is an opportunity for us to go around the state and frankly not just thank people, but hold up what they're doing to the military and let members of Congress know and let the branches know, the service branches know how important these bases are. Because you never know when a decision might be made with a BRAC or without a BRAC to try to consolidate or find efficiencies.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for your questions. Please let Kevin or Emily know if you have any follow-ups.
Great. Thanks.